top film director Steven Spielberg has announced he's making a new Doctor Who series.
Back in 1994, nerds across the country rejoiced.
Doctor Who fans in this country are delighted a new series is being made in the States.
And also, as to be expected, complained in their masses.
They would kill the series.
Because that morning it had been announced, in both newspapers and morning television, that Hollywood film director Steven Spielberg, yes, the Steven Spielberg,
The Hollywood Round!
There isn't a Hollywood Round.
Please, can I go to Hollywood? Please, please, please!
Hollywood are gonna love it.
would in fact be bringing back every Brit's favourite sci-fi show, Doctor Who. The man behind films such as E.T., Jaws, Indiana Jones, Jurassic Park, and so many more beloved family movies seemed a more than perfect fit for this reboot. But quite evidently, something went wrong. Because as of recording this video, it's 2025, and a Spielbergian remake of Doctor Who doesn't exist anymore.
Erased from existence.
So let's take a deep dive, review some of the long-lost test footage for Steven's new Dalek designs, and yes, that weird blob thing you see on screen was about to become the status quo for Daleks. And then we'll uncover the plot, the crazy casting decisions.
Me as Doctor Who, can you imagine the outrage?
The first female Doctor that never was, and so much more. This is the Steven Spielberg Doctor Who remake that never was. Also, if you're new here, hi, please feel free to subscribe if you're enjoying this video at any point throughout. Any support's really appreciated. Let's just crack on. Let's first set the stage. What was the state of Doctor Who at the time? The year was 1994, and the show itself had been off air for 5 years. It was widely ridiculed by media outlets.
To spend a weekend with the Cyberman family of Essex.
BBC bosses.
So why did you cancel the show? I thought it was rubbish. I thought it was pathetic.
And, well, quite frankly, most of the British public.
I hope Steven Spielberg makes the special effects even worse than they were on the original.
And makes the Daleks go upstairs, because, of course, if you want to take over the Earth, you've got to really be able to negotiate steps.
But the very passionate fan base weren't going to let it die that easily. Newspapers, fanzines, which is like a fan magazine, I mean, it's kind of in the name, and various other media outlets frequently put out headlines addressing leaks and rumours from behind the scenes about potential futures of the show. It's nice to know that nothing changes. But while a lot of that was baseless speculation, there were many failed attempts, like actual failed attempts, at getting the show off the ground. For example, in 1992, there was supposed to be a cartoon reboot of Doctor Who. There was a bizarre EastEnders crossover of Doctor Who. I mean, that was an anniversary special.
You're all going on a long journey! A very long journey!
But originally they'd wanted to do an even bigger, proper anniversary special movie, Lost in the Dark Dimension, which also never came to pass. You see, the higher-ups at the BBC in the late 80s to like early to mid-90s much preferred serious drama.
I actually hate sci-fi to begin with, so I'm not a sci-fi fan.
To put it simply, they were all privately educated snobs who absolutely hated Doctor Who.
I had to watch these cardboard things probably clonking across the floor.
Because Doctor Who is just below us. Sci-fi, it's for losers.
It was pathetic.
It's not real television. But apparently this is... Look, okay, not all of them hated the show. For some, it seemed that there was no one with a strong enough or, well, good enough vision for the show to continue.
Had there been somebody around who was absolutely passionate about the programme, who had got a vision of that programme that would actually bring it into a new sort of life, a new world, it could have been an option to actually push that forward at that stage. But I couldn't see anybody there around.
Thus, it simply couldn't be made. They wanted to protect the brand rather than wear it into the ground and destroy its public perception any more than had already been done.
This wasn't the programme that it had been, and that if it was ever to have any life again in the future, it needed a long rest.
That was until late 1991, when American producer Philip Segal, friend and colleague of Mr. Spielberg, set his heart on bringing Doctor Who to the big screen. He went to the BBC as a representative of Spielberg's production company, Amblin Entertainment, to begin his relentless pursuit of the rights to Doctor Who, and soon after, the BBC caved. I mean, they were never really gonna say no to the production company behind Back to the Future, Saving Private Ryan, The Goonies, plus all the other movies that I mentioned earlier. And so talks began, and went on, and on, and on. The revival wasn't yet made public, but things sure were ticking away behind the scenes. Many ideas were thrown around. Should this be a one-off movie, a TV show, a TV movie, and then a TV show? So many variables to go down. The fandom felt alive for the first time in quite a long time. There was excited talk of this potential movie having a budget of around 20 million. Adjusted for inflation, that's roughly £45 million. If only Doctor Who could get that kind of funding now. That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Sometimes there might be a pause.
Amblin Entertainment made it clear that they wanted to fully deliver justice to the Doctor Who brand. To do things with technology that was simply impossible back in the 1960s. One newspaper reads that Segal is expected to dispense with the creaky special effects in favour of state-of-the-art wizardry, including an absolutely huge new TARDIS set. But nothing was concrete, nothing was truly confirmed. Until, at long last in 1993, a little book known as the Leekley Bible was born. Well, written by, you guessed it, John Leekley. Hence why it's the Leekley Bible. Though Spielberg wasn't the author, this moment marked the first time his name began to be attached to Doctor Who. After learning that Philip Segal had secured the rights to Doctor Who under Amblin Entertainment, John Leekley, a devoted fan, reached out with his somewhat zany ideas of how to revive the show. Segal, for some reason, perhaps a lack of alternatives, liked the ideas and hired John to compile them into a pitch document. This pitch was elevated straight to the BBC. And yes, Steven Spielberg's desk. The Leekley revival was conceived as a full reboot of the series. It wasn't a continuation, it would wipe the slate clean, yet it did retain key iconic elements, such as the Doctor remaining a Galifreyan with the trusty TARDIS, Rassilon's Lord President's status on Galifrey, the Master and the Daleks as the Doctor's mortal enemies. However, Leekley also introduced some boldly eccentric twists. The Master, for instance, was envisioned as the Doctor's half-brother.
I thought you were going to say he was your secret brother or something.
You've been watching too much TV.
This idea was actually floated around in the 1970s, but ultimately abandoned after the untimely passing of original Master actor Roger Delgado. But one of the twists that fascinates me most was what have been nicknamed Spider Daleks, and also they're kind of canonised in Doctor Who audio adventures now. But yes, you did hear me correctly, Spider Daleks. On screen now is some test footage from a 1995 episode of Games Master, giving us a behind-the-scenes peek at the CGI being crafted for Spielberg's upcoming flicks.
Spielberg's effects company Amblin Entertainment have their fingers in a number of other pies too, including the sequel to Jurassic Park, and most recently the new Doctor Who TV series. This is an exclusive test shot of a Dalek.
After extensive research, aka tracking down a 2010 Blu-ray of the Doctor Who TV movie, there is a special feature on Disc 2 called VFX Test Reels, in which you can find a clearer look and a couple of different shots of this Dalek redesign rendered in CGI, alongside a title sequence and time vortex that would have been used for the Spielberg version of Doctor Who. But if those aren't clear enough for you, we also have some sketches and stills revealing how this spider-stylized Dalek would have looked. Honestly, I'm not a fan, and I think you'd be very hard-pressed to find someone that actually prefers this design to the original outline. Even the Games Master presenter didn't seem too fond himself.
A Dalek? Come on, Stevie, my pants look more like a Dalek than this.
The original 1960s Dalek design, it's just iconic. A shape too recognisable to mess with, and that's probably one of the big reasons that this redesign never caught on. Thanks to this pitch document though, we do have a very good idea of what this series outline would have been, so we'll start at the top with episode 1, which would have been titled Fathers and Brothers. Which, that's already not a very Doctor Who-y title. Fathers and Brothers was set to be a very, very loose adaptation of Genesis of the Daleks, one of the most loved Doctor Who episodes of all time. The plot? Well, the Doctor discovers the creation of the Daleks at the hands of Davros, but, in quite the shocking twist, the Master shows up and murders Davros, taking his new Dalek creations for his own, ready to conquer time and space. First stop, Galifrey. See, that doesn't actually sound too bad. That sounds kind of exciting until you actually read how it's written in the document. Let me just read you a verbatim extract. A ruggedly handsome young Time Lord named the Doctor discovers that he is the long-lost son of the great explorer Ulysses, but not before the Master becomes the Lord President of Galifrey. The Doctor must travel with the spirit of Barusa, who can only exist inside the time crystals that power the TARDIS, and find his long-lost father to restore the balance of peace across the universe. Look, I'm a nerd. I'm into nerd stuff, but that feels so nerdy. It seems like there were two contrasting visions going on at once. You had the Spielbergian idea of making this show, or this movie, openly accessible and family entertainment like E.T. or Back to the Future or whatever. But Segal's version here is so, layered and complex and lore-heavy. Pick a lane, guys. They also really wanted to reboot Doctor Who to appeal to an American audience, as well as its already established British one. There were strong fandoms in America at the time, but the majority of Americans simply had never heard of the show. Yet, they made the most convoluted episode 1 ever. Only episode 1 was truly set in stone. The rest of the episodes that I'm about to read to you were more pitches, more ideas. The character arcs hadn't been woven into the stories properly. But we'll do a quick-fire read-through of all of the other things in this pitch document, all of the other stories that they were going to adapt into new big-budget American episodes. The Pirates, adapted from The Smugglers. The Doctor arrives in 17th century Cornwall and becomes embroiled in a deadly treasure hunt, tied to a dying man's cryptic clues. As pirates close in, he must outwit both criminals and greedy locals to prevent a blood-soaked legacy from surfacing. The Talons of Weng Chiang. Adapted from, you guessed it, The Talons of Weng Chiang. In 1890s New York Chinatown, people are disappearing under the influence of a mysterious magician with ties to a dangerous future warlord. The Doctor uncovers a plot involving a deadly creature and ancient technology hidden beneath the city. My main hope for this episode, if it were ever to be made, was that that giant rat thing was still in it, because that's my everlasting memory. That and Mr. Sin. I watched this episode as a kid, and that scared me. That needed to be included here. Earthshock, adapted from Earthshock. Now, this is one of our big changes. Cybermen in this reboot were not going to be called Cybermen. They were going to be called Cybes. And you see, these Cybes were underground, plotting Earth's destruction. The Doctor must stop a space freighter from becoming a time bomb. And maybe there'd be like a sad companion death, kind of like Adric. Also, fun fact, Cybermen have actually been referred to as Cybes during the Chris Chibnall era. In the 2020 episode, The Timeless Children, as a nice little nod to this era that never was, the Master says, calling all Cybes, calling all Cybes.
Calling all Cybes. Calling all Cybes.
Which often gets overlooked or forgotten by Doctor Who fans because, in the grand scheme of things, that really wasn't the most controversial thing to go down in the Timeless Children episodes. But it's nice to see that Chris Chibnall paid homage to this, because also this idea of sort of complicating the Doctor's backstory and the Doctor trying to find their adoptive mother and all that. I think it's very clear Chibnall took a lot of inspiration from this Leekley Bible when writing his own era. Like, characters of Tecteun feel very at peace. At peace? In place within this pitch. The horror of Fang Rock was also suggested, just typical standard Doctor Who. The Celestial Toymaker was also going to be remade, where the Doctor's trapped in a surreal world of games and illusions. But the big difference here is that the Toymaker is actually the Toy Master. Shock reveal, the Master was the Toymaker. Another episode would have been titled Don't Shoot, I'm the Doctor, which is a pretty terrible title if you ask me. This was adapted from the first Doctor story, The Gunfighters. It was basically just like an old western. I mean, they are trying to appeal to Americans here. They're doing the Back to the Future 3. Another pretty cool one was Tomb of the Cybes, which is obviously adapted from The Tomb of the Cybermen. This is one that I really understand wanting to remake, or at least adapt, because it's such cool imagery. Like, this is another Classic Who episode that really stuck with me as a child when I watched it back in 2013. The Cybermen breaking out of their tombs is genuinely so cool, and imagine that directed by Steven Spielberg on a huge American budget. Like, that would be so peak. Another episode is The Yeti, which is adapted from The Abominable Snowmen. Same sort of thing, big savage Yetis invading, except these Yetis weren't robots and they also weren't controlled by the Great Intelligence. This would just be like a pure psychological horror story where they're trying to escape Yetis, which is kind of fun. They were also thinking of having like an origin episode for the Cybes, which would have been like a cross between the moon base and the invasion. Speaking of invasions, they were going to loosely adapt the invasion of time. This was going to be called The Outcasts, in which the Doctor returns to Galifrey to find a rebel faction of Time Lords planning to overthrow the corrupt High Council. A civil war brews, and the Doctor must navigate trials, etc, etc. What you'll notice about this pitch as well, it's a lot more Galifrey focused, which I think is a big misstep in and of itself. Like, Doctor Who sort of has the base of Earth, or at least Modern Who has the contemporary base of modern day Earth. That's where we always return. That's where the companion goes home. But in this reboot, Galifrey would have served the function that Earth did. That would have been the main point where we return to after each episode. And I do wonder, in 2005, when Russell T Davies eventually started to reboot Doctor Who, did he take a look at some of these pitches and go, we need to kill Galifrey off? Because the Doctor would return there like a home, and it's too lore-heavy. Killing Galifrey made a lot of sense. Another one which sounds great would have been The Depths, a modern adaptation of The Sea Devils, except it's set in Louisiana Bay instead of, like, the British coast, whichever coastline it's set on. This is another episode that I'd have loved to see have like a big budget take. I guess it's kind of what we're going to get in the upcoming spin-off, The War Between the Land and the Sea, but seeing Sea Devils leave the sea and fight humans in like big budget stuff that doesn't look like what's currently on screen, that would have been really fun. And remember kids, don't let the swords touch your skin. And finally we have Sharda, adapted from Sharda. Now this did actually stick to its English roots. The Doctor takes a trip to Cambridge, and there's cool alien stuff going on. I mean, this episode was never actually made. They started shooting it back in the 1970s with Tom Baker, and then the production had to be called off because of strikes. Shard as a whole deal within itself, that's a story written by Douglas Adams, which would have been included in this reboot. So, we've got stories, we've got a pitch, but what about the cast? From the start, the rumour mill churned out absolutely wild headlines. Like Pamela Anderson being cast as the Doctor's companion. Yes, Baywatch Pamela Anderson. Doctor Who fans were not thrilled.
Doctor Who fans aren't impressed.
They would kill the series. Doctor Who is a series that really is played by real actors. And I'm sorry, the people who are in Baywatch, they play a great part, but then all they have to do is run around a beach, look pretty, and smile a lot. We really need somebody with some acting quality.
Doctor Who cast members also not thrilled.
Sexy Baywatch beauties to be assistants. I mean, it's only carrying on from the sort of age-old stereotype that's always been there about beautiful Doctor Who assistants twisting their ankles and falling over in quarries. It's just a bit disappointing because my character was very different to that and very feisty and tomboyish.
The only person seemingly into it was this slightly creepy news reporter guy.
I like the Baywatch girls on, because it would really take your eyes off the wobbly scenery, really.
Yes.
What's the waving arms thing going on? Weird. Oh, and also I bet Borat would have been a fan. Other suggested companions included Shannon Doherty from Charmed or Beverly Hills 90210. I don't know what that is, but it's on her IMDb. Drew Barrymore from Never Been Kissed and Batman Forever. Erica Eleniak from Baywatch. All of them were very famous for, to put it bluntly, their sex appeal. Clearly, the show was headed in a very specific direction that a lot of people weren't happy with. I'll let this article speak for itself. A bonk. Doctor Who is set to shock millions of TV fans by bonking on screen. I can't believe I'm actually reading this. This is just for historical accuracy. The Time Lord will lose his virginity during his latest out-of-this-world adventures in a 2-hour TV special. One production insider said the script includes a session between the new Doctor and the girl who becomes his human companion. The Doctor has gone without Nookie. What am I actually reading? For more than 30 years, but this is the 1990s, and to bring him up to date, he's got to get his leg over. What is this? The absolute state of the tabloids. That's enough of that article. Hopefully, that talk of bonking was just utter tabloid nonsense. John Pertwee was also one of many who adamantly hoped that that was the case. So let's put that aside and talk about the Doctor himself. Or herself. One surprising report suggested that this movie could feature the first female Doctor, a concept that had been floated around as early as the Tom Baker and Peter Davison eras. One name linked to the role? British actress Jane Seymour, not the Tudor Queen, the Bond girl from Live and Let Die. She even has some relatively doctory looking pictures from the era. I can see why her name was suggested. But alas, it wasn't to be. Doctor Who wouldn't receive an official female Doctor till all the way in 2017. Spielberg insisted on a male Doctor, and the BBC demanded that the actor be British, fearing fan backlash. It has to be someone who has global appeal, but British contenders seem to be getting high priority, he said. Before this rule was enforced, names like Tom Cruise and Tom Hanks were floated about.
To actually play Doctor Who at one point.
That would have been a blast. That's all scheduling, I guess. You know, can't do every job. Honestly, me as Doctor Who, can you imagine? Can you imagine the outrage? I'm an American and I'm going to go over and I'm going to jump in that, red telephone box and, and either wear a scarf and whatever it is.
Red telephone box? Come on, Tom. Other names considered were Alan Rickman, Dudley Moore, and Simon Callow, who would have been the first openly queer actor to play the Doctor. He did actually appear in Doctor Who, not as the Doctor, but as Charles Dickens in the reboot after this reboot. But ultimately, according to the tabloids, the name Spielberg landed on was Eric Idle, the Monty Python guy.
Always look on the bright side of death.
Idle is to play Doctor Who in Steven Spielberg's 20 million movie version. Eric's co-star Michael Palin, a fellow ex-Python, said Eric would be a spiffing Doctor Who. He has a youthful quality, though he's middle-aged. He's mischievous, like Doctor Who, and he'd look great in a scarf. It also seemingly became apparent that Pamela Anderson had passed all of the companion audition stages. Thus, Eric Idle's Doctor will enter the TARDIS with Baywatch actress Pamela Anderson and his assistant Peter O'Toole as his father in the multi-million-pound television series The New Adventures of Doctor Who. Spielberg approached Idle, 51, who enjoyed huge success in America with the film Nuns on the Run, thinking he would appeal to audiences on both sides of the Atlantic. It's all well and good, but Eric Idle has actually denied there being any truth to this. Which is weird, because Eric Saward has openly talked about this factually happening multiple times during interviews.
I also, I met with Michael Crawford, Eric Idle. I mean, there was a huge list.
But apparently, the BBC weren't having it. They didn't like the suggestions of Idle, Pamela Anderson, or ultimately the Leekley Bible pitch. They wanted this to work, but not like this.
Not like this! I've died once, I'm not doing it again!
Just stay calm.
However, the dream was not dead. Leekley and many others may have moved on, but Spielberg hired Matthew Jacobs, who created the Young Indiana Jones series, to deliver a new script for this new revival. It seemed like things were really gearing up. Peter Wagg, who invented the Max Headroom character for Channel 4, was then set to produce this new Doctor Who. But, alas. Ultimately, the BBC and Spielberg agreed that it wasn't working. Spielberg was disappointed. He felt that this Doctor Who reboot was becoming too much like his Young Indiana Jones series and various other Amblin Entertainment projects. So he left. Countless pitches, concept art, scripts, casting talks, gone.
We went through many scripts at Amblin, and it was one of those things where my timing wasn't great with Steven, and he was also thinking about his legacy, and then Katzenberg came along and tried to convince him that he should, just like Louis B. Mayer, have his own studio, and Steven said, I just don't want to do this. I don't want to do it. It's feeling too much like Indiana Jones to me. I don't know. I'm not sure I want to do this. And I said, okay, well, I understand. And I thought, this is not going to happen.
The Steven Spielberg Doctor Who remake was dead. But there was still a spark of hope. Even as Spielberg, Leekley and Jacobs exited the scene, Philip Segal did not give up. He convinced the BBC to pivot. Not a reboot, but a continuation.
I got a call from Fox, because I had talked about it to all the networks, and I got close, but it was Fox. It was my friend Bob Greenblatt, who was running it at the time, called me and said, I think we want to try this.
Sylvester McCoy, the Seventh Doctor, was called back for a regeneration scene, and the wheels were finally turning. The result? The 1996 Doctor Who TV movie starring Paul McGann. McGann was an absolutely inspired choice. Just watch his casting tape.
I think I have. I think I have.
I find it quite interesting how entrenched in the lore of the Leekley Bible this audition tape is.
That the finder would be descended from Rassilon, like you, like your son Ulysses, like his son the Master.
And the final product of the TV movie is a somewhat spiritual successor to the ideas laid out in the Leekley Bible, such as the Eighth Doctor being revealed to be half human, which still to this day hasn't been explained. Back in 2010's The End of Time, Russell T Davies actually wrote an explanation for this in the script, but it was ultimately cut. Absolutely marvellous. Did you know that Peter Capaldi was offered an audition too, although he declined, fearing the heartbreak of rejection would taint his love for the show? Imagine, young Peter Capaldi as the Doctor. Weird. Anthony Stewart Head and Michael Crawford were also suggested. But McGann got the gig, and history was made. Sort of. The TV movie was intended to launch a full new series, but low ratings and very mixed reviews in the US ultimately killed that dream. Doctor Who lay dormant once again.
You promised us Steven Spielberg. We spent millions.
We might as well have given it all up to some sweaty fat anorak from Southend. It was unfathomable drivel.
Lay dormant until... well, that's a story for another time.
Sack Russell T Davies, sack Jane Tranter, sack Phil Collinson, sack Julie Gardner.
If you enjoyed this deep dive, please do feel free to like, comment, share and subscribe. I also have a Patreon if you want exclusive early access to new videos and some fun behind the scenes vlogs of our fan films. And stay tuned for more strange forgotten corners of TV and film history. I've got plenty more videos where that came from. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye. Chris Brands writes, Paul McGann is by far the hunkiest Doctor so far, and women will obviously find him very attractive. And so will you, Chris, apparently.
Don't forget to click below and subscribe to the official Confused Adipose YouTube channel.
I will destroy you!
She's not seen a single episode.
No, I've watched your episodes.
Keep these sonic screwdrivers.
What else am I saying about the film? Don't watch this one.